Delighted to be joined today on the Audit Opinion by Geni Whitehouse, somebody whose name will mean a lot to a lot of people. But Ginny, pass over to you. Do a brief introduction.
All right. So I'm the president of the ITA, which is how we are mostly associated, Mark. That is an association of technology professionals, most of whom have a connection to the accounting space. And the community that I think you're most closely connected with is our CIO community, which is the internal technology leader segment of our membership. And we have the CIOs of the top 50 CPA firms of the US are members. They came to us looking for a place to collaborate with their peers, and so that's a component that we added to our membership. We also include CRs, consulting resellers. These are people who are business owners that implement mid-market accounting software solutions for their clients. And then we've added most recently a track for the client accounting service leaders of the top 100 CPA firms. So we have a cross section of different folks. We also include as members companies like yours. We have solution providers, companies who are providing the software that our members are either using internally or using with their clients. So we have this amazing group of people who come together for 3 meetings a year. And the goal is to elevate all of us, to make us better professionals, better serve our clients, and have better people in our firms.
What are you seeing and hearing as we speak as the biggest, most impactful trends that those leaders are focusing their time, effort, and energy on?
There are a lot of trends. I think it's what's most interesting to me is the speed of change, and I think that's one of the things that all of us are wrestling with, whether we're in the accounting space or not. But I think the accounting profession used to be one of the most stable, secure, steady environments that you could work in, and I think that's probably the most shocking thing to most of these folks is that it's not the same reliable, environment that it used to be. And if you're a CIO inside a big CPA firm, you can only imagine the challenges of keeping up with not only the technology improvements for customers, for clients, but also the internal requirements for running that firm. And you add to that the security risk and then the impact of AI and the impact on your staff and all of that. They're on a faster and faster moving treadmill, I think, every day. And so I think the speed of change overall is the biggest thing that I see impacting all of us, but particularly the CIOs and even the CAS leaders. Because if you think about what's going on in client accounting service or CAS, clients are coming in with new requirements and different applications that they want to leverage in running their own businesses. And so those folks are trying to keep up. And at the same time, the CIOs are trying to support those teams, but also have, security concerns that they're trying to enforce. So I think that would be it. And then there's all kinds of things within that change environment, which, Mark, I mean, it's crazy what we're seeing.
How do you feel the pace of change and the extent of change is impacting the role of the CIO or the role of leaders of accounting firms? Do you think, based on what you're doing at ITA, those leaders are having to adjust the way they approach innovation and technology investment, Jenny?
Well, I think absolutely. I think they're not alone. I think everybody does, but I think the impact is greater in light of what's going on in their environment. This whole private equity acquisition, merger and acquisition activity is like nothing we've seen. I mean, I've been doing this way longer than you have, Mark, and we've never seen. First of all, private equity was unheard of in our space, and now they're coming in. And so, if you're a CIO, and again, you came into an accounting firm probably because it was a safe, reliable and stable place to be as a CIO. And now big firms are acquiring other big firms, and that CIO seat is not secure. If you're an acquired firm, you're potentially going to move into either another area or move out, and that's something that they haven't had to address. So there's a bit of fear and uncertainty now that we didn't have. But also, if you're acquiring a firm, you've got all this integration that you have to consider across small firms, large firms, all these different firms. And we're hearing, I mean, every time we get ready for an event, we work with members of our organization who are CIOs to plan the content. And just getting people to show up for those meetings is increasingly difficult because of the environment they're working in. So, I mean, that's a huge indicator to me that we've got so much going on, and then, there's a critical meeting. We're either acquiring somebody, or we're in discussions about being acquired, or we're adjusting to implementing new solutions that allow us to operate across all these new firms. So that it's I don't know how they do it. I mean, I think it's a really crazy time for those folks.
I think when it comes to technology, what that creates is a need for you to have your tech stack in order, whereas previously, if you were one firm, you kind of knew you had 3 to 5 years to be able to fix some of these things, right? And you could carefully go through a stage, right? Okay, we'll fix this year, and then next year we'll come to this, and then next year we'll get to that. What we're seeing is really an urgency around getting that tech stack in order, because who wants to bring on an acquired firm to the tech stack that you don't want to be on yourself? That creates, it's very difficult to get people to change to something you believe in. Something you don't believe in, that is really difficult to get to change.
You have an old legacy system that doesn't work well for you, and now you're going to double your requirements and the people that are on it, and it's going to make it a huge nightmare. So that's what we're seeing right now, and I know you're seeing this. Between now and the end of the year, these firms are going nuts trying to implement new internal practice management tools, workflow solutions, all kinds of stuff is happening. And one of the things about these large firms, we have these three different tracks. We have CIOs, we have the CAS leaders, and we have consulting resellers. Many of these firms have people in all three buckets, all three categories, and all three categories are in unprecedented times of states of flux where everything's changing. I mean, if you're a consulting reseller, you're having the same private equity conversations. You owned your own company, and now you're either selling out or you're getting rolled up into one of these holding entity situations where you have a whole different set of rules as well. And also different requirements about what you have to achieve in terms of KPIs, which is also a big impact on these folks. The reporting requirements are very different. The oversight that you're facing now from these new external leaders, what you have to do, the speed with which you need to make decisions, huge impact on what we're doing, which is again why we need the right tools to help support the processes that run around all these firms. And all three of these roles are in need of those kinds of solutions and tools. And in many cases, the vendor space has not kept up with what we need to run firms of today. So I think there's a lot of friction as a result.
What I sense is that naturally, without private equity's involvement in the accounting profession, that change would have happened over the next 5 to 10 years, right? Those new tools would have taken over from the old tools, and we'd have a new set of market leaders. It feels like that's trying to be done in the next 2 to 3 years, though, instead now, because of the pace that's being thrown at this from the bigger macro factors. Is that what you're seeing? How do you feel about that theory?
I would agree. And I think there's some infusion of capital that allows you to move more quickly. You can make the investments now instead of waiting a couple of years because you've got this external investment. Ideally, I mean, that's the promise, right? We're going to get investment that allows us to grow and move faster internally to do the things that we need to do. So, Mark, I'm in a firm as well. So I'm president of the ITA, but I'm also in a small firm in Napa Valley working with clients. And we're seeing the same struggles in the small firm. It's how do I move fast enough to maintain the things that I have to maintain, but still meet these new innovative trends. And most firms of all sizes don't have excess capacity sitting around to do project implementations, to manage, the change management of bringing in new firms and new people and new cultures and all of that. But also one of the things that you mentioned, one of the challenges that we have is this multi-generational workforce now, where we have people coming in. Young people today are coming in with AI tools at their disposal. So if I'm not on top of those trends, I'm going to get upward pressure from those young people to move faster, in addition to downward pressure from my acquirers. I'm in the middle of those two layers. I've got pressure to keep up with what they're already doing, whether we make it a formal tool that we're using or not. They're going to be using AI. They're going to be using some of these other apps and things that they're used to using forever, pretty much from the day they started doing anything. They've been using an external tool. So I've got the top end down pressure to be more efficient, to meet my revenue targets, to do all this stuff while maintaining a secure environment for both my firm and also being aware about those client facing applications that I've got to implement quickly And then I've got these young folks going, we need better stuff. And we're not going to work on some of these legacy systems that do some of this stuff. So they're really in a high pressure box right now to try to do everything that they have to do. Um, so the talent, and they still have to find talent to do this work. So they need the tech folks on their teams, and finding the right mix of talent now is very difficult because the skill set has changed. When in the accounting space itself, we used to hire for a high level of detail. That was your main requirement. And now we need flexibility, innovation, client conversation skills, a whole bunch of stuff that none of us accounting folks signed up for. So I'm a CPA myself, I failed to mention that. Most of us went to accounting so we didn't have to talk to people like you, Mark, scary people, especially people who have products and stuff and want us to buy things. And they were like, we don't want to see people. Let me do spreadsheets. And now all of a sudden, across all of the disciplines, we're being told that we need to, take something AI generates and have a conversation about it with the client and be proactive and do all these other things. So every person in that organization is feeling some level of stress about how they're supposed to be now. And then that's different from what they're supposed to be tomorrow, most likely. So it's an interesting time. Lots of opportunity, but lots of stress, I would say.
How are you trying to juggle that where you're seeing the pressure from both sides?
Well, I mean, from my perspective inside a firm, I think what we're doing is trying to harness that expertise. But also, if you're not, I mean, we're a small firm and private equity is not involved, but we're getting pressure from clients because clients have access to AI tools as well. So we can all get the same stuff. So how do we illustrate that there's value that we provide? And the way that we do that is by having conversations, explaining what we're talking about, and then helping them make proactive decisions about what they need to do tomorrow. But that involves training their teams, which is something we've never done historically, educating people on financial concepts and then connecting the dots to the frontline workers in organizations. So it's advisory, which is what I do in my firm. I only do advisory. I was out training a winery group yesterday on communication skills. I never signed up for that as a CPA. What? I got to train people on how to, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know about, different behavioral styles. But in order to be successful today, those are the kind of things we got to be able to do. And so again, if I'm the CIO, now I've got to understand the tool set that my teams need to be successful in treating clients differently. I've got to understand the onboarding process. I've got to understand all the marketing stuff that's going on around me. I mean, it's a huge, vast area of automation that they need to be aware of, and in many cases, supporting their internal client base on.
I think that what this pace of change really requires is a greater focus on skills, on training people.
I think training has always been a underinvestment or misdirected, I would say, because, from the time you go to college as an accountant, you're trained in technical skills. Nobody ever taught me how to have a client conversation or how to explain something like cash flow. I was 15 years in a firm, made partner, and went into high tech to start to do software to try to make what I did more valuable. It was really my mission. I've got all this insight, but nobody cares and nobody does anything with it, right? I've got the financial statements that make sense to me. It's a pretty little picture that I've created, but it goes in a drawer and is ignored. So, you go in search of technology to try to make it better, and you get the same problem. You've got now technology and accounting that nobody understands. And so nobody sat me down in college and said, here's how you help somebody fix cash flow. What I learned is here's how to show that it's bad. And then next year you'll come back and I'll tell you if it's better or worse, but I can't tell you what to do in between. That is a huge shift for us. And again, that's new skills that requires training and all that stuff. And we're not making those investments, or we don't know where to find the right training in many cases. But if you look at IT folks and accountants, we were both sort of raised in a technology matters. The technical skills are what we hire for. And again, even if you're in IT now, the technical knowledge, if you can't translate it to those clients, internal clients in your firm, you're not adding enough value. So you got to be able to explain to those business clients and business users in your firm why they need to do something or how it impacts them. You need to be able to negotiate contracts. You need to be able to, all kinds of things. You need to be innovative and look for new ways to do things. You need to understand process. Workflows and internal processes where much of the breakdown is happening inside these firms. And so you can't just be the person who understands, how to write a Python script, which is valuable now, but you need to be able to understand the processes that you're going to automate using that Python script. So it's a interesting place to hang out if you're in tech and accounting. But again, opportunity. We can do more things well than we used to be able to do, but we've still got to be able to reach out and connect to those individuals who are impacted by that automation.
Where do you see the best IT leaders focusing and prioritizing, Ginny?
I think they have to be aware of what's going on in the AI space. But what worries me about that is that, and this is I'm seeing both on the client side and looking at what wineries are doing, but also in what people are doing inside their firms, is we're doing siloed AI. So we're getting a bolt on an AI solution for each of our disconnected applications. And so I'm getting, no context from that AI solution if I'm doing it that way. And I think what we're looking at is more integration across apps. I think the end game for all of us is faster, more meaningful insights. That's what we're trying to get. That's what we have to have in order to survive. And that's if you're at a company or if you're in a CPA firm. And so that requires you to integrate your AI strategy across all your apps, not to do an AI for this and an AI for that and, separate. And I think we're seeing that happen, but it's not as easy as it seems because we can't get the data out of many of these applications as quickly as we need. And again, the same thing is what we're trying to do for clients is pull all this data together and get the insights from it so that we can make faster decisions. But I think that's the mandate for these times is I got to have insights in my hands faster so that I can make decisions more quickly, the right decisions more quickly.
The hidden piece in there is you're going to need good quality, reliable, accurate data to be able to drive this forward, because the best dashboard in the world is completely flawed if the data underneath it is completely flawed.
Yeah, that is a huge problem because we might have good data, but it's locked down in some of these more legacy systems that firms are still using for some segment of the business. So I think getting that data out, and that's what, again, what we're finding on the client side is I've got all these disconnected apps and I have data that's not very clean. I haven't consistently entered information. So one of the things we're hoping that AI is going to do is allow us to clean up all that data so that we can then integrate it into one big data lake or data warehouse or data, whatever you want to call it, and data bucket, and then get those over firm, over client insights in a better way. But the other thing that I see that worries me is we're talking about KPIs everywhere. And, the private equity firms are doing KPIs and everybody's doing KPIs. But to me, a KPI is the same thing as a financial statement. It is an historical record of where you are right now. If you're doing it at the financial statement level, which is where most of us accounting folks are trained, that is one piece of information. That tells me where I am today. But if I want to fix that KPI, I have to go below that. I have to look at the frontline workers. I have to look at the processes that I have my people implementing. I have to look at what activities drove that negative KPI. So let's say my receivables days, it's taken too long for me to collect. And that's both internal in a firm and external at a client. My receivables are taking too long. Everybody's taking too long to pay me. I can't fix that KPI from a financial statement. I have to go below it. What operational tools am I using to do my billing? How am I tracking what people are doing? What's the workflow that I'm using? What are all the components of the engagements that I have? All those elements are where the problem is fixed. But what we're doing is measuring at the top after it's broken and then punishing people because they didn't make it better. And what we need to do is look at the stuff below it and then get the people doing the work to figure out what to measure. That's what we call activity input measures. That's how you fix it. And most of us aren't trained in doing that at all. We're just KPIing things. We're counting a bunch of stuff that's already done instead of looking at the components of how that thing got broken in the first place. And that's a big shift that the whole profession is trying to figure out, I think.
How can accounting firms take that concept and put it into action, Ginny? How can people really start to drive within the business more accountability and ownership of not just metrics, but the metrics that actually matter for the role that they're performing.
Well, what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing this so I meet with the members of each of my content tracks. So the CIOs, we meet before each of our conferences to decide what topics are relevant. And I'm seeing conversations around project management and process come up over and over again. And that's where you fix it, right? You analyze somebody who knows how to document and review the processes. And again, this is what we do as auditors. We go look at the processes that our clients are applying to get the work done. And that is where the problem arises. So we have a question in the advisory work that I do called, is it a people or a process issue? If I've got some identified KPI that I want to fix, you look at that, and 99% of the time it's a process related issue. We're not trained to look at process as accountants. So getting people on your teams who are process folks, and you're seeing COO roles, people are looking at operations. We're looking at, so you're seeing, I think, a requirement that somebody on the team is really a process expert, and you have them document the steps that we're going through. You bring the people who are in that process in the room, and it immediately becomes obvious where the bottlenecks are. And that's where you start to focus, but you get those frontline people involved in figuring out how to undo those bottlenecks. But I think that's a shift that we're going to see more and more of, more focus on process and documenting that, and also really understanding where we need to improve things, and then figuring out how to measure improvements in those steps.
This brings me back to a tool we use in our business, and I know has been a previous session at an ITA conference that I attended around the entrepreneurial operating system from the book Traction by Geno Wickman. And there's some concepts within that book that really are coming out in this conversation. And one of them, everyone has a number. Everyone has a very clear single thing that they're focused on, and that is the thing that's going to help us achieve the North Star. And things like accountability charts to make sure people are clear on what their role, responsibilities, and accountabilities are. But I see the modern workforce really leaning into these concepts in the sense of people want to have more ownership of their role. They want to have more autonomy in their role. And these are the kind of things that make sure that you can give that without feeling like you're worried that the workforce is going to go all sorts of different directions. How can you almost set, this is the direction we all need to go in, but up to each of you to plot your path to make sure that what you're doing is helping us get there.
The problem is, I have a financial goal that I potentially understand if I'm at the top, right? Because I have all this information and insight at my disposal. By the time you get down to the frontline workers, they don't have any of that information. They also don't understand financial statements. And very few people really understand financial statements, even if you're running a company. You understand P&L, income statement, and you know you need to make a profit at some level. You know you need cash and things like that. But if I say I want to improve this particular aspect of my business, and that's our goal for the year, even if it's just grow revenue, I don't know what I can do to impact that. If you think about a typical person in an accounting firm and you tell them that they got to generate more work, well, most of them have no control over how many clients we have. They don't have control over what's billed, because half of the time their time is written off if it's a traditional firm. They don't have control over what work they're assigned. So what am I supposed to do differently tomorrow that's going to help you? I've got to break it down for those people. And basically, if you're doing the tax prep, one of the things that we say is ask one due question of your client, like, where do you go to see if your business is on track? Ask an owner that question. And then we need to make sure that we're supporting them in that, not the financial statements if that isn't where they go. If they look at their operational system, like in our case, they're looking at the seller production software to see how they're doing on production. They're looking at their point of sale system to see what's coming in. They're not going into QuickBooks or Nav or whatever solution, or Acumatica or Intact or any of those tools. They're in this other thing to look at what matters to them. And we need to be getting our people to align with that and to at least understand that and ask different questions. That has been a huge challenge for the last 20 plus years. I've been talking to accountants, but ask one more question. And we don't have time. I've got 5,000 tax returns on my desk and I can't ask them one new question. And then I just kind of go, okay, you don't have time to really take care of your client. Something's broken. That's
It's
how you get the front line to have an impact on revenue by finding out more about the client than what they know from the tax return or the financial statement even.
it's something I've talked about previously. Is this the connotation of technology or the concept around automation is one that most accountants are quite comfortable with, in the sense of, well, it's going to save us time, and time equals money, and therefore there is a return on investment play to be had here. But
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit short sighted in the sense of your example, because
Yeah.
surely it is what we do with that time that then is going to establish whether it's worth something or not.
You've heard, I'm sure you've heard Ed Klaus and Ron Baker talking about that where we are right now is that people are looking for transformative services. It is not transformative to hand you your tax return and say, this is what you owe. It is not transformative to say, here's your financial statement. Sorry, you're not doing well. Bye. Um, it is transformative to say, your cash flow is off. Let's talk about the levers you can push to make that cash flow better. That requires different tools and different skill sets, and also that in the moment insight. So I can see tomorrow what's happening and if we're on the right track to improve things, but it's very different. And again, we're not necessarily trained in that yet, but there are ways to get better at it. But if you're looking to do that, um, you're going to look for more value, not more efficiency. How can I add more value to the client? Not how can I be faster at doing potentially the wrong things? How can I get the tax return out faster? Isn't what the client want. I mean, they do want it faster probably, but that isn't the main value. That's not going to elevate your value in their eyes. It's what did you see when you were doing my tax return that's going to help me make better decisions next year? And when you're in production mode, you don't have capacity to even think about that.
One of the ways of tackling those two areas of maybe creating a little bit more entrepreneurialism or advisory skill set in our people that are out there with our clients, and how do we build more skill set confidence in the people that we're going to be trying to challenge to think differently about the skills that they've got today?
Well, you're kinda gonna get me on my soapbox now, Mark. This has been I left the firm, again, dissatisfied with what I did as tax, went into high tech and thought, "I'm gonna fix the profession by automating things." And then I realized I can automate it, but it still aren't nobody understands what's coming out of the automation either. So now I've got automation and financial stuff that people don't understand. I finally found a dashboard that had an interactive what if slider capability. And I started looking at that and I'm like, this is nirvana because now I can explain things about the financials that I couldn't explain previously in a visual way. And joined the company to sell that. And I went to CPAs and said, look at this thing. This is like the answer to all of my prayers. Now people can understand the difference between profit and cash and also see how to improve cash flow. What a magical thing. I showed it to CPA after CPA. Well, we're not going to do that. Where's the report? I don't want to have a conversation. And I was like, what? This is what they want. Yeah, but if I show them they need to improve, reduce inventory days, I don't know how to do that. I'm not going to open that Pandora's box. If I tell them they need to reduce AR days, I don't know what to do about that. I'm not showing them this thing because then they're going to expect me to have the answers. And I went, well, okay, well, I got to figure out how to teach people how to do that stuff. And so I went in search of a advisory training and I found it. I got trained in it and I've been doing it with wineries ever since. I mean, eventually that's how I got to this winery. And all I do is advisory, but I didn't have the comfort either. But by using this tool, it started things that I didn't really understand started to make sense. And I started to get the more demos I did. And, a few accountants got it, said, yeah, I want to have a conversation. I don't just want to print out a report they don't read. Um, but they have to have a checklist, right? We're trained to checklist. So I'm working with a toolkit that has all of that. So the biggest barrier to doing this is confidence in our own abilities. If I ask a new question like, where do you go to see if your business is on track? And they say, I go to my production software and I go, oh, well, bye. Well, what I do, but because I have a niche that we work in, a focused niche, which is wine industry, I know the tools they're using. I know the things. I work with those vendors. So if they say we're in this software, oh, go, yeah, you're using the costing component of that. And they're like, what? Um, so I know those tools now. But these are things I've acquired with time. But what I had to overcome is the fear of not being the expert, which is the biggest barrier to success for us as moving into this new space. I am not going to ask a question if I don't know what to do with the answer. The shift I made, and I moved into wine industry from Atlanta, Mark, and you may not know redneck versus wine country, but I mean, South Carolina, we drank Franzia in a box, which you also may not know, but cheap wine, Mark, quantity over quality. And I'm showing up in the Cabernet, highfalutin wine country, and I'm going to be an expert sounding like this. Um, but I realize I don't need to be an expert. They're experts in their business. My role is to ask them different questions and to also help them find data that supports what these leaders of businesses already intuitively know. And that is where we need to be as profession. Give people the data to back up what they intuitively already know, help them feel like the expert, make them feel smarter instead of proving how smart I am. And once I did that, it frees me to just be curious, which is we have those skills as inquiring accountants, but we think we have to know everything in order to get in front of that client, and that is absolutely not the case.
The reality is, to help somebody run a business, there is no way that you can know more than that person running their business about their business.
Exactly.
It's very difficult. But the reality is, if we compare this to a completely different sector, right? People people go to a psychiatrist or they go to somebody to get support from, and they
Yeah.
don't go to them because they're going to share with them all of their technical expertise and all their studies. They're going to ask the right questions to get that person to almost go through a process that they learn themselves. So, while that might feel an uncomfortable comparison for people from the accounting profession, I think that like the more we talk about confidence and confidence previously in a technical compliance service, confidence comes through knowledge. And I would say that confidence in this more advisory space comes from being comfortable not knowing the answers to all of the questions.
That is a tremendous mindset shift. So the training, so I acquired the training for this advisory. I have a company where I coach people through it. And that is the biggest challenge is three aspects. It's a mindset, tool set, and skill set that you have to have in order to make the shift. The mindset one is the hardest. I I go out to clients and I always use that analogy. We don't go to a psychologist and say, I'm having trouble in my marriage. And they don't look at us and go, well, just divorce the jerk and get out of it. If they did that, we would leave, right? They say, well, tell me more about, they ask questions until you come to your own conclusion. It's exactly what we should be doing. And I've done consulting with clients. I go through an engagement. They say, we have a problem. My teams aren't doing what they need to do. They're not being self-sufficient. I can't take vacation because they're all dependent on me. They bring us in, we do interview people, we ask a bunch of questions, we gather all this data. I bring everybody in the room, the leadership team and the owner, I bring them in the room and basically present my findings. And the answer is basically the problem is you, the leader. You're not freeing your people to do what they need to do. I put this up, I have quotes, I have all this data to back it up. And we go through this thing. And I'm terrified. I got to tell this owner that it's your fault. And we get to the end of it and he goes, well, you're not telling me anything that I didn't know. In my traditional role, that would have been a fail, right? What's my value of that? And I said, that's right. But now you have data to support it. And he was like, right. That's why I hired you. Um, that's, the value is in the conversation, the insights that you uncover, the bringing the teams in the room to talk about this. Nobody'd asked them what they thought. And he has an intuitive knowledge that it's really, his or her, whoever's running it's fault. But it's the data that we bring, the asking those different questions, bringing it together in a way that it makes sense to them. That external independent perspective that we are known for is huge value in doing this kind of work. we come at it without an emotional connection. And my lack of knowledge in how wine is made and all that other stuff was a huge plus because I asked all the dumb questions, which it ended up not being so dumb. Like, why are you doing that? That's the weirdest thing I've ever. What? You do what? How do you get chocolate in that glass of Cabernet? Well, we don't actually put chocolate in there. That's just one of the ways we describe it. Um, all of that stuff is actually the value. Oh, nobody's ever asked us that question. We ask them, why are you doing this? The Simon Sinek start with why. Why are you doing that? To make a profit? No, you're not. Tell me the why. What got you to do this thing? And so turns out that's where the value is. And that's the mindset shift. And the same thing is impacting the way the CIO is working, I would think. It's like asking, why are we doing this? And what are we trying to get to as a company? If you're in a big CPA firm right now, you're really looking at what is our long-term play here? What's our end in mind? What's our exit strategy? Are we looking to go private equity? Are we looking to build a legacy and maintain the culture that we have in this firm? I mean, this is a chance for people to really get clear on that throughout the organization. And then the CIO can align all the tools that they implement, all of the focus that they have, all of the contracts they sign in support of that objective. But if we don't have clarity around who we're trying to be, how can anybody align behind it? So those kinds of things that sound fluffy, like mission and vision and why we're doing what we're doing, are more critically important than they've ever been. And then everything else we do needs to be in support of those things.
What cultural challenges or, issues that the CIOs are maybe facing from this greater level of merger and acquisition and greater level of competition in the market, Ginny? How is that impacting their role and their priorities in their role?
Well, I think it's affecting everything they do. I mean, think about trying to integrate two big firms. Everybody's on different systems. I've got to get everybody trained and migrate all the data over and combine it. I've got to consider staff needs. I'm going to have overlap of people. I'm going to have to renegotiate all the contracts because now I have twice the potential for, leverage with a vendor. Everything in my world is going to be different. You got to probably go back to the basics and look at what really matters, where the most critical pieces are. I mean, we've got a tax season coming up again. I've got two firms using different software, different engagement working paper. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, just that alone, just getting all the prior year data migrated over. Then you got